So a while back, Sheila and I got an opportunity to go on a cruise. Now, this cruise was a little unique, okay? It wasn't your everyday cruise because this cruise was also a pastor's conference. Now, I know some of you are like, oh, it sounds like you're really roughing it for Jesus on the pastor's conference cruise. But if you can imagine anything more awkward or weird or, a little bit boring than going on a cruise with a whole bunch of pastors, you got kind of a little glimpse on it. Now, but this is a little bit unique. It's the company that loans us money, the Solomon Foundation. They've been a huge and important ministry partner for years now for us, for 10 years. We have been just thrilled to process with them. And what happens is people like you and I, we invest money with Solomon Foundation, and then they loan that money back to churches so that they can build buildings and move forward faster than the bank would want us to do. And such a great ministry partner. And one of the great perks of it is that they have a pastor's conference, and to get us to go, they always do it in crazy cool places like a cruise. So we were on this cruise. Now, if the cruise wasn't awkward enough with a couple hundred pastors all jammed on it in the same time, there was also on the same cruise at the same time, the same itinerary and everything, there was a group of atheists having a conference. So that's a little bit of a weird thing. Now, there's 3,000 people on this cruise boat at any time. So, the couple hundred pastors and the couple hundred atheists running into each other and talking about why they're there and doing all that, that's a pretty slim likelihood, right? I mean, because they don't really run in the same circles, don't land in the same places, don't talk to the same people, right? Except for one room. There was a particular room on this thing. Now, you're probably thinking I mean the casino, but it wasn't that. The particular room where our two worlds overlap significantly was the cigar lounge. This particular cruise had one room that was maybe 15 feet wide and about maybe 20 or so feet long, and they called it the cigar lounge. It had leather chairs and great place to sit and smoke. It was the only place on the cruise ship that you could smoke cigars. And my buddies, pastors or not, right? We're buddies. And we hang out and we smoke a fair number of cigars. And so did the atheist crowd. Now, you'd think that would be a tenuous kind of thing, but we're pretty relatable people and we hang out with people pretty well, and we got connected in that, and we had some great conversations back and forth between this small group of pastors who smoke cigars and this small group of atheists who thought we would hate them. And what was pretty obvious after just a little bit of time is that when I said the word God and when they said the word God, it really was two totally different meanings. Like when I said something about God, I meant the God that is revealed in Scripture, the God that I have a personal relationship with. But when they said the word God, what they were usually taking was the image that they've painted of God because of movies or art or something like that. Or maybe they're taking the life experiences that they've had, particular perspectives or things that they were disappointed in when they were young. Or they're taking the something that someone had told them about God and something that somebody kind of commonly held as a belief. So what became really obvious over just a few minutes was that you and I have a different definition of God. Like we'd sit across these places just hanging out, trading cigars, talking about stuff. But every time the word God would come up, I would mean one thing, they'd mean another. It's like we were using two totally different words. Maybe you're here with a similar tension to them, right? I know maybe there's not a lot of people in this room that are atheists, right? That don't believe that there is a God. You're here kind of asking some questions about this idea of God, but maybe your tensions are similar. Maybe you're at this point in your story have held God and faith and church and Jesus at arm's length. Maybe you've held them there because of something you've come to understand about him. The thought idea that you have in your head about God kind of got drawn up, and maybe you're here holding God at arm's length because you're not sure that the God that you saw in movies or the God that you've seen in art, it really is relevant to your life. Or maybe it's because of your life experiences. Maybe you've been through disappointment and anger and frustration. Or maybe there may be something that your parents told you, maybe told you something about God and you're not sure about it. I mean, just last week at Journey, we have this gathering called First Steps. And First Steps is a really great kind of gathering where new people, every 6 or so weeks, we get together, and people who are new to Journey, and we hang out after the third service. We talk a little bit about where we've been, a lot about where we're going, answer a lot of questions. We really have great conversation, get to connect with people. Now, this isn't an advertisement for First Steps, okay? That's coming up, so if you're fairly new or you don't know what First Steps is, you should definitely look for it as it comes up. But as a part of that conversation, one of the people at the table said, man, this whole story of faith is new to me. Like, it's a few years old, and the reality is whenever we at church talk about a book of the Bible or a perspective, they're like, I don't really have that. Like, I don't really know the books of the Bible. I don't really know the stories. My faith is only so old. And maybe you're here today and your questions about God are maybe arm's length because you're like, I don't know, I'm a little intimidated, nervous about it. Or another person, not that long ago, I was baptizing her, and she had shared with me that when she came to Journey, every single week she showed up here, she came because she had just moved to the South, and then she wanted to have an answer for the where do you go to church question. And so she came to Journey because she's like, I don't know, it seems it's not that boring. It doesn't take that long. I can go there, and then when people ask me, I can just say I go to Journey. But the truth was, when she walked in the doors, she said she didn't believe that there was a God. And every week when we would say to people like, hey, the communion tray is going to come by in a minute, and I want you to know something, you're more than welcome to hand it to the person next to you. We don't want you to pretend to be something you're not. You can belong here even before you believe. She said, man, I every week pass that to the tray to the person next to me. She was holding God at arm's length because she wasn't sure about her questions. The picture that she had of God wasn't necessarily the right one, and she was holding him at arm's length because of it. I'm thrilled to say that not only did I baptize her that day, today she's serving in our kids' ministry. It's a fantastic movement of God in her life, and it's been amazing to watch all along the way. Or dozens of other people who have given up on God that I know that are sitting right here in this room right now, or joining us online, or a part of our family of faith, who maybe are holding God at arm's length because they prayed for healing, or they prayed for something to work out, or somebody betrayed them and it hurt them, or maybe your story has some church hurt in it and Christians have been a part of it. But can I just say this? Like, it's so important that we understand you owe it to yourselves. You owe it to yourselves to paint an accurate picture of God and then accept or reject him based on that accurate picture. Because it's just like those atheists we talked with, and we realized pretty quickly that they had drawn one picture and I was talking about a totally different picture. And what we explained to them, what I processed with them over those days of smoking cigars together, was that you owe it to yourself to draw an accurate picture of God and then choose to accept or reject him based on that. Because what people have done, what we tend to do, is we tend to take God and we tend to recreate him in our image. He agrees with us. He thinks like us. We like him the way he is because we've created him perfectly and uniquely fit to us. But that's not true. Mark Twain is credited with saying this, that God created man in his own image, and man, being a gentleman, returned the favor. That's exactly what we've done. We have kind of recreated God, haven't we? We've taken what is God, what truly is the character and the nature of God, and we've kind of just formed and fit him so that he votes like us, and he makes me feel good when I choose certain things, and doesn't make me feel bad about some things that I probably should feel bad about. We have recreated God in our own image. And again, we go back to the same thing I had in those conversations with those atheists on the cruise. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to ourselves to paint an accurate picture of who God is, and then accept him or reject him, and then choose what we're going to do with him. Because you can't either accept or reject God until you literally know exactly who he is. There was a famous writer in the 20th century. His name is A.W. Tozer, and he wrote this. He said, what comes to mind when we think about God is the most important thing about us. The picture that you draw in your mind when you think about who God is the most important thing about you. Because it's such an important and consistent problem, is that when we have a picture that God is a million miles away, and that he doesn't really care, and that he's angry all the time, that picture tells us how we live, isn't it? What the picture, if you picture God as kind of like, oh, super cool and super chill and doesn't really care and he's just your buddy, right? That flavors and informs the way you live. What you think about, what comes to mind, the picture that you draw when you think about God is the most important thing about you. And I think we all need to admit something that's going to make us all a little bit uncomfortable. A little bit uncomfortable is really good for us. We need to admit together, you and me, every single person in this room, that we really don't know God, that we don't know what God is like, but we can learn. You see, what I mean by that is that every one of us, naturally, we don't know what God is like because our perspective or the lens through which we see God is flavored and changed. We hear God on, like an idea. We draw a picture based on movies we've seen or paintings or maybe some art that you've understood or maybe a song that kind of captures a little bit of it. And we draw a picture of God based on it or our experiences in life or what some really well-meaning people like our pastors or our parents told us growing up. And what is true about it is that we didn't really get to know God. We got to know about God. And we don't naturally know what God is like, but we can learn. And here's the truth of learning. We can't go back to our experiences in the media we go to. We can't go back to our parents and pastors. You can't trust me to tell you what God is like. The only way for us to really learn about what God is like, we have to go to the source. We have to go right back to where it all begins. We have to go back to what God says about God. What does God say about himself that tells us who God is? Now listen, most of the Bible from front to back is really a story, isn't it? Like we tend to think of it like it's just like it's rules and boxes and literature and things like, but it's not. It's a story. It has a redemption arc. It has a beginning. It has tension. It has enemies. It has ups and downs along the way. It really, at its core, is a story. And here's the surprise. It's not a story about you. It's not a story about who you are. It's not a story about why you're important and doggone it, people should like you. It's a story about God, his glory, and his pursuit of you, not because you're good, but because he's good. One of the stories in that storyline is the story of the children of Israel. If you're familiar at all with the Bible, the second book is called the book of Exodus. Most of the time we know it because God releases the children of Israel from captivity in Egypt, and they cross the Red Sea. That's the book of Exodus. Exodus meaning leaving or exit. And so we know little bits about that, but later in the book, God has released the children of Israel, the Israelites, from captivity. They've crossed the Red Sea. They've gotten the first round of the 10 Commandments, and they've gotten that kind of information. And God and this man named Moses, who is leading the children of Israel, have a very unique relationship. And God reveals things about himself to Moses and lets us peek in on it. See, Moses and God had a very unique relationship. This is how it's characterized. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. This wasn't common then. You see, this is the beginning of the story where God goes, hey, I want to bring freedom, and I want to bring this kind of friend-to-friend, face-to-face access to all of my children, but he starts it with Moses. And he has this life relationship where Moses and God talk about things that matter. He has then what we all have access to now. And here's what he says. He's like, God, I want to know you more. I want to follow you every step. I want to lead the children of Israel to follow you every single step of the way. We want to do what you say. We want to be like you. And so he says to him, God, would you show me the fullness of your glory? Would you just show me the fullness of who you are? Just let me take a glimpse of it. And God graciously says to Moses, hey, Moses, I'd love to do that, but if I did it, it'd kill you, right? If I showed you the fullness, nobody can see that and survive. And so he says, but I'll do you one better. He basically says, the Lord says, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, And in you, I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. Now, he says, listen, you can't see me face to face, but I'll let my goodness pass by, just a little fraction of me. And in that kind of moment, I will proclaim to you something that's very, very, very important. Now, there's a whole lot going on in this passage, and we don't want to miss any of it, but the reality is we don't have time to unpack it. But what you can get from this is this phrase he says to him. He says, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. And what we need to get from that, more important than anything else, is that God has a name. God has a name. If you're going to paint an accurate picture of God and then based on that accurate picture of God, choose whether you're going to accept or reject him, you got to start with this. You got to know his name. You got to know who he is. And he says, I will proclaim my name, the Lord, right? He says that my name is, the Lord. Now, most of the time when you see that written out in your Bible, you see it, the capital Lord, Lord. When it refers to God, or when it uses these Hebrew words, it always has the Lord all in caps. Now, it's kind of a little unique way, right? It's not just the capital L. It's all 4 letters that are written out, the Lord. Now, what we don't know from just reading it in English is that's not really what the original language said. Now, this sounds technical, and it's a little deep in the water, but I'll promise you this. What we're diving for is worth finding. So hold on for 1 second and just work with me. The word the Lord there is not really the name of God. That's an English placeholder because the word that is written in Hebrew is not a word we have a translation for. You see, there's a challenge that comes in when this one word comes up. It's because the ancient Hebrew language didn't have vowels. Now, they didn't use vowels. Like, it didn't matter. You got to imagine, though, it's probably because they didn't have pen and paper, right? They couldn't just scribble an A or an E or an IOU, right? They didn't have vowels because their written language depended on carving things into stone. So you could imagine that they were like, listen, let's not write stuff down that we don't need to remember, right? And so they would not use vowels in ancient written Hebrew. So they would write things down. Now listen, that sounds like it'd be really difficult. You're probably saying, listen, I don't want to study ancient written Hebrew because that sounds ridiculous, and I get that, fair point, right? But let me just explain it to you this way. If I put this on the screen right here, I'm guessing that you can figure out what that says. Probably looked at it for a second and went, oh yeah, I can fill in the blanks where there aren't any vowels, right? And it says this is a sentence. You'd be like, oh yeah. There's enough information there for me to understand in the written language. Now, I can pronounce the vowels, but I can't write the vowel. You can do this without writing the vowels, but I got to say them, right? Otherwise, that doesn't make sense. Spoken Hebrew had vowels, had the pronunciation of them, but people figured this out. The problem is that people so revered the name of God, written in Hebrew, that they didn't want to say it, right? They were like, listen, God told us his name, and I'm afraid of disobeying that 10th commandment that said not to take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And so they're like so careful about revering the name of God that they stopped saying it. So we don't know how to pronounce what it is that he said because they stopped saying it, and all they wrote down was the consonants. All they wrote down was the consonants, and they didn't speak the name, so all we have is 4 consonant letters. Now, most of the time we pronounce that Yahweh. He says, I will declare my name, not the Lord. I will declare my name, Yahweh. I will declare my name, Yahweh, in your presence. Can I just say this to you? If you're going to paint an accurate picture of God and then choose to accept or reject him, you should start by knowing his name. You should start by knowing his name is not the Lord who's distant and far away and over you. His name is Yahweh. It means he is. He is with you. He is capable. He is always available. He is Yahweh. Now, there's nothing wrong with using the word the Lord. You could say, I believe in the Lord, or I'll follow the Lord. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Those are not bad things, right? That's a good way of saying it, but understand something. The Lord is his title. Yahweh is his name. The Lord is his function in our life. Yahweh is who he is. It's his identity. And that's what's so important about it, about like the difference is that the Lord is his title. You can use that if you want, but it's just not very personal, is it? Yahweh is his name. What's important about that is this. Like Sheila and I have been married for 29 years this June. You know what I don't call her? I don't call her the wife because she knows me intimately. We've been married for a long time. She knows me intimately, so she calls me Jeremy or Hun, right? Baby, right? I don't call her the wife. I call her baby. I call her she, because we're close, right? She has a relationship with me. To my kids, I'm dad, right? The most amazing little 2-year-old girl on this planet, I'm pops, right? To the lady at the doctor's office, I'm Mr. Brown. To the lady at the grocery store, I'm sir. See, what we call someone is based on our relationship with them. God isn't to us the Lord. That is who he is. It's not untrue about him. It's just not personal. To us, he's Yahweh. And Jesus took it another step further. He said that we should call him Daddy. We should call him Abba, Father, this close personal friend that's close to me. And that's what's so important. It's when Jesus, the next morning, Moses, God kept his promise to Moses, and he did this. He says, the Lord came down in the clouds and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, Yahweh. He proclaimed his name, Yahweh. You see what he was doing was that he was letting him in on something. He was letting him in on something that's so important and so strategic. He was saying, listen, I am going to, in your presence, proclaim my name, the Lord. Have you ever watched one of those superhero movies? Like, I like watching, I remember growing up watching Batman and Superman and all those things. Now, listen, when you watch those, just think about that. Even if you're not a comic book fan, you know this, that there are secret identities in those two characters. Like, you and I know something that none of the characters in the show or in the movie know. You and I know that Bruce Wayne is really Batman. You and I know that Superman's secret identity is really Clark Kent, the mild-mannered reporter, right? You and I know that when Superman has his glasses on, he's Clark Kent, and you and I know that when he takes them off, he's Superman. But nobody else in the story really knows that. They all operate under a different assumption. They all know him by the title Batman or by the title Superman. They all know that Batman is a vigilante who fights crime. They all know that Superman flies. They all know what those people do, but they don't know who they are. You see, what God was inviting Moses into and what God is inviting us into. What God is inviting Moses into and what God is inviting you into is drawing an accurate picture of him, not with his title, but with his name. See, he's inviting us to know what is the behind the scenes, what's the secret identity, what's the true, unbelievable person of who God is to us. See, when we know who Bruce Wayne is, we know that he doesn't just fight crime. We know that he's avenging the death of his parents. We know that Superman isn't just a guy who flies around and is really strong, right? We know that he is literally from another planet. And we know that his heart is to make this place a better place. You know, what is going on in the secret identity is more important than what the person does. The Israelite people were no different. They knew God by what he did for them. He released us from captivity. They knew God as the God who parted the Red Sea, and we walked by, and that was really cool. They knew God with what he did, but God was inviting Moses, he's inviting you, to paint an accurate picture of who he is by understanding first his secret identity, what really is going inside. And that he says, I will proclaim to you my name. And then the next few sentences are unbelievable, mind-blowing. If you're going to paint a picture, you might title it Yahweh. But that doesn't tell you everything about him. It just tells you and I that he is personally available to us. The next few words, he says this about who he is. He says, I am the Lord Yahweh, the Lord Yahweh. I am the God of compassion and mercy. I'm slow to anger and filled up with unfailing love and faithfulness. I lavish unfailing love to 1,000 generations. I forgive iniquity, rebellion, and sin, but I don't excuse the guilty. These words are so much. They tell us so many things about who God is. They tell us so much, and it's way too much to unpack in just a little bit. I mean, they tell us just off the top that he's compassionate and merciful, that he's slow to anger and he's full of unfailing love, that he pours out love and he forgives sin, but he's so just that he doesn't leave the guilty unpunished. And how does he do all that? Oh man, we're painting, right? Oh man, we've got the brushes out and there's depth of color. What we're not going to do is just get a pencil sketch. Over the next few weeks together, we're going to get the deep color paint brushes out. We're going to paint an accurate picture of who God is. And then we're going to get to know that picture. And then we're going to decide together, do I accept him for who he is? Or do I want to reject him because he doesn't fit my mold? See, we all do it, right? All the way back to the atheists in the cruise ship. You and I, me, every single one of us, we paint a picture of God that fits our mold. And then we accept or reject him. But what we owe it to ourselves to do is to paint an accurate picture. So we want to do that together. We did this last series that we did, the Good to Grow series, kind of to set a pattern of behavior in our life. For 3 weeks, we wanted to say, this is what it's going to take to grow spiritually. Now today, we launch a brand new series where we're going to offer unique resources to help you and I sort this whole thing out. We're going to have this conversation in the morning, and then this afternoon, we're going to have what we call our winter groups. And winter groups start tonight right here in this room at 5:30. And if you want to be a part of winter groups, you could just show up tonight at 5:30. It's not too late. You've had this conversation. You're like, hey, I want to paint with better pictures. I don't want a pencil sketch that is just going to take a little bit. I want to dive deeper. I want to walk into it. Now listen, there's not quizzes. There's nothing. It's just conversations about how this stuff really applies to our real lives as we paint that picture. Would you please do this? Would you just risk it for me? Just show up tonight, 5:30 right here in this room. Just show up. We tear down these chairs. We get together around tables and we have conversations. Nobody's going to put you on the spot. Nobody's going to make you feel awkward or put you in a weird position. We're just simply going to talk together, and you're more than welcome to just listen. And together we're going to paint a picture of exactly who God is, because we owe it to ourselves to be accurate. Can I just say this? Like, we should at least together have this same prayer in our hearts. It's the exact same thing that Moses said to God. You could say that was a prayer, right? Moses was talking to God, and he just said this. He responded, then show me your glory. Can we do that? I mean, can we just make that our prayer for this Deconstructing series? Not that we're tearing God apart, but we're diving in, you know? And there's a practice. I'm not much of a foodie, right? I mean, I always tend to err on the side of lots of food with lots of flavor, right? So I can't always taste the nuances of food, but I can do that in two ways. I can do that with cigars, and I can do that with music. I can appreciate the layers that are of complexity that are there with those two things. And now, since most of you think that cigars just stink, we'll just put that one aside and let's talk about music. What you hear on the radio is just a song, right? It's 3 minutes and 40 seconds of all these instruments kind of together. But you know, just like the video that showed before I came up here, that there's more to it than that. That there are layer upon layer of complexity. There are drums that are laid in, there's keyboards and bass, and there's guitars, and there's other tracks and other instruments, and then vocals that are laid in there. And each of those has an infinite number of layers of complexity and tone and balance and all these different things. The song that you hear that's 3 minutes and 40 seconds long is not really all that complex until you dive into it. And that's what we're doing. We're just asking God, would you show me your glory? Can I just paint a picture that's accurate of you so that I can understand who you are, and then I can choose with an accurate picture. Do I want to accept or reject the God that says he's compassionate and gracious? Do I want to accept or reject the God who says that he lavishes out love on 1,000 generations? Do I want to accept or reject the God who says that he would punish the guilty, but still forgive iniquity and sin? Who is this God? And I just think we should ask him together. Would you show me your glory? Let's pray together. Jesus, would you do that? Would you to us, over the next few weeks together, here in this morning gathering and our afternoon gatherings around groups, would you reveal to us through your word who you really are? God, we want to know you. We want to follow you. We want to make a reasonable and informed decision on whether we should accept or reject you. We all want to know more about you. We just ask that you would do for us what you did for Moses and show us your glory.